Our first speaker is a person I met about 2 years ago. And I was looking for solutions because to me, this whole thing was overwhelming, just like it is to you right now. I was looking for some kind of solution, some kind of positive attitude, some way to lift me out of my depression. Because quite honestly, I was depressed over the situation. And I ran across our next speaker. He's the founder and the main supporter of a very important movement called Climate Healers. He's also the author of several books. But what's most important about Climate Healers, and I encourage you to go to his website, is that he has a plan, a comprehensive plan, and it's focused around making the kind of dietary change we're talking about over a matter of a few weeks to a few months. Dr. Sailesh is the first expert I bring to you. Let's start by listening to a video presentation that Dr. Rao put together for us, and then we'll get back for some questions and answers.
Hello, everybody. This is Sailesh Rao of Climate Healers. I want to talk to you about how nature is the most perfect system design that's around. As a system designer, I'm in awe of nature. In fact, the forest behind me used to be a coffee plantation 20 years ago, and it got turned into a forest by just letting the animals be. The animals came and dropped their seeds and new trees were born, and the entire ecosystem just rebounded and came back. And this is why I'm in awe of nature. So I'm going to talk to you today about how COVID-19 is literally put human beings in the chrysalis phase for humanity. And what do I mean by that? COVID-19 is a way of Mother Nature telling us to go to our rooms, to think about what we have done, and to decide what we want to become when we get out. So this is literally like the chrysalis phase, if you use the analogy of the caterpillar turning to the butterfly. So we have been in the caterpillar phase as a consuming species. And now we are being told to think about what we want to become when we get out of this. So this is part of the greatest transformation in human history. Call it a transformation because Tracy Martin said that change is inevitable, but transformation is intentional. Change is something that nature is going to do, whether we like it or not. It's going to happen. Transformation is us taking control and saying we are going to change ourselves before nature forces it on us. Because as I said, nature is a perfect system design. No matter when we decide to transform, nature is going to recover. Nature is going to be fine. It's whether or not we want to be part of nature. That is the question we face. So in nature, every species has a role. Even when a species seems destructive, it actually has a constructive role. So for instance, when you see elephant breaking branches of trees, you may think the elephant is being destructive to the forest. But in reality, wherever the elephant broke branches of trees, that's where the sunlight streams to nourish the underbrush. So even in that phase, the elephant is being constructive. In the same way, we have been doing something. We have done something actually amazing over the last 10,000 years. We maintained the temperature on the planet to be constant for 10,000 years. And over the last 200 years, we've increased it by 1 degree Celsius. But in the process, we have created all the tools and technologies to become the true climate regulators of the planet. So our hypothesis is that human beings have a role in the ecosystem to be the climate regulators of planet Earth. In fact, if we agree that human beings have changed the climate of the planet, then we have automatically assumed responsibility for regulating it, right? So we have no choice but to become climate regulators of the planet. And for the first 10,000 years, we were doing it unconsciously. Now we are being called to become conscious of our role as climate regulators of the planet. And this is already happening. This transformation is happening on an individual basis. Each one of us is transforming one by one. So I want to illustrate with the story of Paul Chapman. Paul Chapman, in 2013, could not walk 10 steps without feeling excruciating chest pain. So he went to his doctor, who told him to go see a cardiologist. The cardiologist examined him and said that his heart was enlarged, his right side had thickened, and one of his major arteries was 100% blocked, and two of his other major arteries were 65% blocked. So he told Paul, you have no choice. You are going to die unless you get a triple bypass heart surgery, or he gave him a choice of going on a whole food plant-based vegan diet to reverse his heart disease. And very few people get the second choice. But Paul was fortunate. He got the second choice and he chose it. So then his cardiologist connected him with Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, who taught him how to eat right. He and his wife, Anne. So it cost him $975 for the cooking classes that he got. But he completely reversed his heart disease. So then he applied to Blue Cross Blue Shield, his insurer, and asked for a reimbursement of the $975. And Blue Cross Blue Shield refused. He took it all the way to headquarters, pointing out the absurdity of them willing to cut a check for $125,000 for his triple bypass surgery, but unwilling to pay $975 for the cooking classes. They told him they don't have a code for cooking classes, and that if he really wants to be reimbursed for that, he needs to go to his legislature to change policies. You see, that is the system we have today. It does not have a code for the cure, but plenty of codes to make money of the diseases that we get. And so what is happening on a system level is just millions of Paul Chatlins put together, millions and billions of Paul Chatlins put together. So this is why we are in the situation we are in. In Western countries, 14 of the 15 leading causes of death can be mitigated and even reversed with a whole foods plant-based vegan diet. This is what Dr. Michael Gerber showed in his How Not to Die book. Of the 15 leading causes of death, the only one that cannot be reversed is iatrogenic causes, number 15, which happens to be doctors' mistakes. And of the top 14 diseases that can be mitigated and even reversed, 4 of them, heart disease, lung disease, diabetes, and hypertension, are the major reasons why we have COVID-19 fatalities. And at the same time, hunger-related causes kill more people globally than any other ailment. So you can see that the food system is causing most of our mortality. And in the richest country in the world, America, 97% of the people don't get enough fiber in their diet. 98% lack potassium. 94% lack vitamin D. 89% lack vitamin E. And 44% lack calcium. For heaven's sake, we eat so much cheese, and yet 44% of the people don't get enough calcium in their diets. So you ask, what is wrong? Is there a lack of food on the planet? Is that why this is happening? And it turns out to be the exact opposite. There's plenty of food on the planet. In fact, we are extracting 9 billion tons of food from the planet, from 45% of the land area of the planet. And yet we only eat 1.5 billion tons of food, which is shown on the right-hand side here, the food intake block. Of that 1.5 billion tons of food, 1.35 billion tons is already plant-based. It's only 0.19 billion tons that's animal-based. So most of our food is already plant-based. But to get that 0.19 billion tons of animal foods, we're actually feeding our animals 7.27 billion tons of food. So most of the food we extract from the planet, we're feeding to our animals. And they are giving us 0.26 billion tons of food that goes into this industrial processing block. A whole bunch gets wasted, and you get 0.19 billion tons out. And in addition, our animals are providing us with 0.14 billion tons of other substances, like skin and bones and blood that we use in our industrial processing blocks for other things. So this is why going vegan is so important, because when we go vegan, we're insisting that none of the things we use come from animals. So we are not only rejecting animal foods, but we're also rejecting animal products. And when we do that, that's when we can eliminate this livestock production block. And when we eliminate this block, then you can save all this food. And that's how we can reverse climate change and any other environmental issues. So our food system, to me, is an engineering shambles. It is not designed to provide nutrition to people. It is designed to make sure that the richest person has access to the most exotic food at any given time. That's how it's optimized. Okay? But there's no reason why we cannot optimize it for making sure that everyone gets the right nutrition. Our food system is the leading cause of biodiversity loss. In fact, our animal agriculture is the leading cause for it. Because 10,000 years ago, wild animals were 200 million tons. That's the weight of all the wild animals put together, shown in green here on the left. And human beings were a tiny little blip on top of that. By 1970, wild animal population had decreased by 60%. And our human beings, our population was equal to the weight of all the wild animals that lived 10,000 years ago. And on top of that, our farmed animals were double our weight, but eating roughly 3 times as much food as we eat. Now, fast forward to 2020, wild animals are down by another 80%, which means they're really 92% down from what they were 10,000 years ago. So only 8% of the original wild animal population by weight remains today. Our population has doubled from 1970 levels. So we are now double the weight of all the wild animals that lived 10,000 years ago. But our farmed animals are 4 times the weight, but they're presenting the profile of a biomass that's 9 times the weight of all the wild animals that lived 10,000 years ago. What do I mean by that? See, our farmed animals have been genetically selected to eat enormous amounts of food in order to grow rapidly or to provide our animal foods in enormous quantities. For instance, our dairy cows, the average dairy cow weighs 1,700 pounds and eats 140 to 150 pounds of food a day, whereas the average white rhinoceros in the wild weighs 5,100 pounds, so triple the weight of the dairy cow, but only eats 120 pounds of grass a day. So as far as the planet is concerned, the dairy cow looks like it's bigger than the white rhinoceros. So if you take the equivalent weight, then the weight of all of our farmed animals is equal to 9 times the weight of all the wild animals that lived 10,000 years ago. So raising farmed animals for food is the leading cause of biodiversity loss. That's where most of our food is going. It is also the leading cause of ecosystems collapse. How do we turn forests into deserts? Well, through our livestock, our farmed animals, because they eat anything new that's growing on the ground. So the forest has a hard time coming back. And shutting down animal agriculture as soon as possible is the leading solution to climate change. As an engineer, I can assure you, because engineers are the ones who come up with solutions, that even if you can argue that the leading cause is fossil fuels, to solve climate change, you have to first shut down animal agriculture. And then as the forests come back, we can shut down the fossil fuel infrastructure 10% per year over the next 10 years. Instead, if we shut down the fossil fuel infrastructure first and don't do anything about animal agriculture, we're going to heat up the planet. This is not what we want to do. And it's also the root cause of COVID-19. And Dr. Anthony Fauci said, it boggles my mind how when we have so many diseases that emanate out of the unusual human-animal interface, that we don't just shut it down. So I asked Dr. Aisha Akhtar, who's an expert on infectious diseases, what is this unusual human-animal interface? And she said, it's any interface in which animals are stressed. So when you stress animals, that's the potential source of another pandemic, jumping from the animal to the human being. So it's not just China's wet markets, but also America's factory farming that's spawning these diseases, or laboratories, or circuses, or zoos. I mean, any of those places can spawn these pandemics. And most of the major diseases that we know of came from animals. There's mad cow disease, swine flu, COVID-19, bird flu, SARS, Ebola. These are the ones that are shown here in the PETA graphic. But in addition, cholera, typhoid, leprosy. I mean, they all came from animals. And so Dr. Michael Gerber has has given a talk on, can we stop a future pandemic? He talks about how, yes, we can stop a future pandemic by stop stressing animals out. But we have a system in which there is no code for this cure. There's plenty of code to make money off the diseases. So this is why President Trump issued an executive order in April, late April, decreeing slaughterhouses to be critical infrastructure and slaughterhouse workers to be frontline workers, essential frontline workers. So he used a defense authorization to make such a determination. And in response, Isaac Bailey wrote an opinion piece in CNN pointing out the immorality of asking fellow humans to risk their lives so that we can eat a burger. And this prompted us to write a book on this topic, Why Animal Agriculture is Immoral. It's an anthology with over 20 contributors, and it is now available on Amazon. And basically, it is dedicated to all the animals with whom we share this beautiful planet and to all the children who will inherit the consequences of our choices. Because it's very clear. It's unnecessary, and it's being propagated just to continue the system where diseases are created with animals. And so from the bottom up, from the grassroots, the indigenous community has come together, and they signed a treaty just a few days ago, treaty to protect and restore Mother Earth, in which one of the articles, Article 15, explicitly calls for a commitment to eliminate the exploitation of our animal relatives. So this is a huge step that the indigenous community has taken, and I think we need to support them. And the best way to support them is to make healthy, immune-boosting vegan meals readily available to every human being on the planet, anyone who needs it, so that we can all heal. It's only when we all heal that we will think about healing the earth. So the immediate action that's needed is to make this food easily available. And that's our Food Healers Initiative. And so this gives us this moment of choice. We are in the chrysalis, and people are desperately trying to go back to being butterfly, to being caterpillars. And I'm saying, no, we need to think about how to become butterflies. We need to move in the other direction. It's not about going back to being consumers again. So we're facing this moment of choice, and I think nature is going to force us to go towards the butterfly, no matter what we try to do. So this is part of the greatest transformation in human history. It's a transformation, rather than going extinct, we're going to transform from a system of normalized violence to a system of normal non-violence. And we're going to stop being a predator species and transform into a caretaker species. And we deserve a new name for that. We call ourselves Homo sapiens sapiens at the moment, which is Latin for the wise hominid. And I've never really met a truly wise person going around saying I'm wise, and that too twice. So it's a boastful name that we have given ourselves. And I think that deserves to be changed. Judy Carmen has come up with the term Homo ahimsa, which is a combination of a Latin word and a Sanskrit word. Ahimsa means non-violence. So it signifies that we are coming together as a species from around the world, and that it describes our character and not our characteristic. So it requires 7 core shifts. The first is from speciesism, colonialism, racism, ableism, and patriarchy, the domination oppression paradigm, to veganism and radical sacredness, the ahimsa and sacred relationships paradigm, from diseases and divisiveness for humanity to health and harmony and diversity for humanity, from destruction and exploitation of the planet to regeneration and caretaking of the planet, from violence and cruelty to animals to kindness and compassion for animals, from an egocentric culture of consumerism to an ecocentric culture of accountability, from a mindset of scarcity to a mindset of generosity, and from a profit-driven economy to a service-driven economy. And what we have shown is that the game of money that we play today, the rules of the game are set up in such a way that we automatically do everything on the left-hand side of this shift. And that by transforming to a new game, we call the game of Aquarius, we can make sure that we automatically do everything on the right-hand side of this transformation. So it's just by changing the game we play that we can transform ourselves, that we can transform how we act. So it's something that is going to happen, and it's exciting that we are going to be part of this greatest transformation in human history. You can get more information, all the facts that are given you can check it at climatehealers.org/facts. You can get all the references there. I've written a few books, and you can read all the books at climatehealers.org/for you/books. And you can join us and work with us. And you can look for our calendar there and then join our meetings. So thank you all very, very much. And I'm really, really looking forward to 2021. Happy New Year to you all.
I think there's something that I'd like to have emphasized that's really important. As I started out in my introduction, is that scientists, people who really understand what's going on, have come to the conclusion that taking care of all of the carbon emissions, the fossil fuel problems, is going to be insufficient. We have to make a worldwide dietary change. But one of the things you said that I'd like you to emphasize a little bit and explain more in detail is why it's crucial that we make the dietary changes maybe ahead of, certainly along with, our changes in the fossil fuel. Why can't we just shut down the fossil fuels? What do you mean that it's going to warm the planet?
Good question. Because along with the carbon dioxide we emit when we burn fossil fuels, we also emit a whole bunch of aerosols. And these are cooling gases or cooling particles. So the estimate is that the aerosols are actually cooling the Earth by about 1 watt per square meter right now. And but overall, we are heating the Earth by 2.29 watts per square meter, some 2.3 watts per square meter. These are all numbers from 2015, by the way. I'm sure they have gotten worse since then. But so based on those numbers, if we shut down the fossil fuel infrastructure first, all the aerosols will come down within a few weeks. Okay, they don't last there for more than a few weeks. So meaning we're constantly pumping up aerosols every time we burn fossil fuels to keep the Earth cool. And simultaneously, we are building up the CO2. So it's not a good thing that we are doing with the fossil fuels. But there is a process. There's an engineering process that you need to go through for shutting down these infrastructure. First thing you need to do is to shut down the animal agriculture industry and then bring back the forests. So as the forests come back, they start sucking down the CO2. And as they suck down the CO2, then you can shut down the fossil fuel infrastructure. So then the cooling gases that you reduce will be compensated for by the trees that are coming back, that are going to suck down the CO2. So it's an engineering project, right? So it's an engineering process. How do you shut down something? And there are two major problems on Earth. One is the animal agriculture, and the other one is fossil fuel burning. So there's a process for shutting them down, which will make sure that we don't heat up the Earth more than we're heating it up today.
Okay, the other thing that really disturbed me about what you said in this presentation and what you told me when we initially met about a year ago is that you believed that we were capable of becoming a planet primarily of vegan following human beings by 2026. I believe that coordinates with your granddaughter's 16th birthday.
Right.
I didn't believe that. In fact, it kind of set me off on your presentation, on your beliefs, because I thought you were being overly optimistic. But just like you brought out, the changes that have taken place since February of 2020 with the pandemic of COVID-19 and the changes that occurred in the ability of people to change their whole life. I'm now a believer. I don't think you're being unreasonable at all. thinking that the majority of the diet on planet Earth from human beings will be a plant food based diet. And we're really talking about a vegan diet. We're talking about a diet without dairy, without fish, without beef and pork. So any other thoughts that you have that make you optimistic that we can make these kind of dietary changes worldwide?
Yeah, so these are, I mean, the changes can be done really fast because human beings, we tend to follow the herd. We tend to follow each other. So by just changing the default, in most cases, you can make people eat a lot more plants than they eat right now. For instance, in any corporation, if you say every meeting will have a default vegan, whole food, plant-based vegan, healthy food, and then if you want unhealthy food, you have to ask for it. I bet you that 90% of the people will opt for the healthy food. They will stick with what they have. But right now, it's the opposite, right? We have the opposite default right now.
What do you think are the major obstacles in getting people to make better decisions? Is it just the industries, just the food industry or the fossil fuel industry? Who do we have to address and confront and ask for cooperation and, more realistic steps to be taken to save the planet for our children and grandchildren? I mean, really, that's what it's all about. Any of you who are family members, I'm sure you feel like we do, like Dr. Rao and I do. But we've had a good life. In fact, you may say this has been the best of all times. I've had a chance to take my children around the world to eat the best foods, the best restaurants, and so on, to enjoy beautiful animals. And wow, it's just been wonderful. But who do I have to confront to help the situation change so that my children can show their children the same kind of things that we've enjoyed through our lives? Yeah. Who do we have to deal with?
Yeah, it's a systemic issue, right? So what do I mean by a systemic issue? It's a system that fundamentally is stable. So it maintains its stability by keeping certain stories in place. The major story that's in place is animals are here for us to use. Animals are here for us to exploit. Animals are put on earth for that purpose. Now, just like when Galileo said, actually the earth goes around the sun, not the other way around, he got persecuted for that, right? So we are seeing a Galileo moment right now in civilization, where we are saying, no, the animals are not put here for us to exploit. Animals are here on their own. They need to be set free as well. So that is why vegans are getting persecuted. And the word vegan is not kosher in the current system because it is contrary to what the system believes. So we are changing a complete belief system by doing this, right? And so the entire system has to now transform. Yeah, and there are all the people who are high up in the system are trying to maintain the system. That's their job, actually. So we can't blame them. This is their job. This is why they were put there. So we really need to build a new system from the ground up, in which non-violence is normal. So this is like Dr. Martin Luther King's beloved community. It's not just about saying beloved community, but actually building it. And that's what we need to do. And I think it needs to happen from the ground up. So we actually, our ISKCON temple in Phoenix has agreed to cook for the indigenous community healthy immune boosting food. And the indigenous community, the Navajo Nation, they have said, yes, we want that food. So they're willing to eat it. So now we made that connection. And now, this is the kind of interaction that would just eliminate the need for diabetes medication and all this nonsense that's propping up the system. Because the people who sell diabetes medication, they want to sell more of it every year. Why? Because we told them that's the way they should behave. We actually take away money from their stock if their revenue goes down every year, right? So we actually tell them, you need to keep growing your economy. You need to keep growing your corporations. So fundamentally, the system has to shift to one that's based on health, not on diseases.
So this is really a bottoms-up movement. And each of us as individuals have a chance to make a difference. Heather, would you like to bring in any questions from the chat before we move along to our next presenter?
Well, let's see. We have just, questions more about the vaccine. Well, how concerned are you with the GMO industry and what's happening to the food supply?
So would you like to answer that, Dr. Raoul? Or, if I answer, people are going to get upset because I think GMO is a dangerous distraction. I've never seen a case of GMO disease, but our planet is burning in hell because of the consumption of livestock products. So, I don't get a lot of favor by, even though I believe that these are Frankenstein foods manufactured by Monsanto. I realize that. But they're not the problem. If we keep focusing our attention on GMOs or other things, we are distracted from where we need to pay our attention, which is the kinds of foods we're eating from the animal kingdom.
Yeah, GMOs are not doing any favor to the planet, definitely, because this is how they actually cut down the Amazon. When you cut down the Amazon wants to come back. It's very difficult to chop down a forest and kill it. So how do you really grow soybeans in the Amazon? You have to pour Monsanto's glyphosate, Roundup, kill everything that could grow except for your GMO seeds. That's how they grow soybeans in the Amazon. So I'm not saying GMOs are good at all. They are destroying the soil for us. But Dr. McDougall is right. We need to focus on getting the animals out of the picture. Stop hurting animals. That's number one. And of course, eat as much organic foods as possible. Organic vegetables, organic grains. And that's where our entire future depends upon bringing back the soil. Because when you bring back the soil, the carbon gets sequestered in the soil. And land right now has 3 times as much carbon as the atmosphere. And the atmosphere has 30% more carbon than it should. Well, which means we need to increase the carbon on land by 10%. Can we not do that? Of course we can do that. So this is not so hard to do when we put our minds to it. But our system does not have a code for it right now.
Well, thank you. It's really nice to start out with a hopeful presentation, Dr. Raoul. And that's why I positioned you in this primary position to give people an opportunity to see that we're not condemned, that there are things that we can do.